Here on History Women Exposed, the most brutal methods of punishment. Unfortunately, some of these methods, even today, continues to be applied in some parts of the world. Spanish donkey. This tool historically, during Spanish English, used brutally during the Middle Ages. Torture tool. This vehicle, known as the Spanish threshold, sometimes Chevrolet, or by different names such as the Unity Mule. Slaves after the American Civil War. Similar to the ground one, it is known that he was tortured by torture. This torture device is in the shape of a pointed triangle, sometimes supported by 4 legs, sometimes 2 legs. This spike in its cruelest form could be covered with thorns. Victim women used to sit this pointed and thorny teacher, especially in the genitals, cause serious injuries. Many women could not walk because of these wounds. Sometimes these wounds were so deep and serious, there were even deaths from blood loss. In order to impose additional punishment on some women, weights tied to your legs. These weights, woman, severe damage to his bones and internal organs. Especially women who are punished in this way with weights, usually displayed in public in the town square. In addition to this humiliating and cruel, some were tar and feathers were glued on. Throughout this history, it was one of the most brutal torture inflicted on women. Bitter pear. This instrument is known as the mouth pear and between 1800 years with his face, believed to be used to punish women. This metal tool, pear-shaped and spines can be found at the ends. The barbed section, it could be opened and closed with the help of a spring or key. Placing the tool on the woman's body could cause irreversible serious damage. Written in 1639. In Cavali's History of Thieves, this tool is mentioned. Invention of the device in the book, looting your hands, used to silence victims. One tool is attributed to one thief named Captain Guillotine. But historical sources, is this tool really meant to hurt? Or is it designed to surprise people? Exact one information does not offer people this, your tools only. They prefer to believe it was designed to surprise. Because if it was really used to cause pain, that would be a really scary detail for our date. Your tool really, although there is no definitive evidence that it has been used. In some museums today, these devices, possible to find examples. Burn at the stake. This method of punishment is 18 BC. Dates back to ancient Babylonian times in the 19th century and ancient Egypt throughout history. It was used in ancient Rome and the Middle Ages. Among the reasons women are accused, various actions, have beliefs or ethnic backgrounds. Executed by being burned by being tied to an accident. One of the most famous women is Jeanne d'Arc. But in America, especially in Salem Mausoleum, none of the women accused of tense burned to death. All executed by hanging. Between 1608 and 2002. First woman killed in this way in America. She was a slave named Maria. It was believed that he burned to houses. USA. It is known that he was burned and executed by accident on. The last woman was another African woman in 1805. However, the last accident was the woman who was burned by being tied, Spanish in 1826. Recorded during his English. Historically, sometimes a rope was tied around the neck of the victims and the flames suffocated to death before reaching them. But not everyone has reached such a human ending. Death of Catherine Hayes in 1726. That the flames spread too fast and the executioner's strangulation. Because it didn't perform on time, it was pretty painful. Sometimes the victims die faster. Bags of gunpowder were tied to his legs and arms. This method has not always been effective. Days when the wind is strong or used. If the wood was fresh, there could be heavy pain. Similar throughout history, one other method used to experience pain. Inside the prisoners, it was a deadly bull, a metal one structure that was put and heated. Republican marriage. Republican marriage, during the French Revolution. Stated to apply to priests and nuns. Quite cruel one method of punishment. One man and one woman in this method, stripped naked, tied together and thrown into the river. The purpose of this cruel act, not just physically, it was also spiritually humiliating. Bouter Jeans. He is known as the name behind this action. This event is historical. There are doubts about the reality. In 1793 and 1794, some people living in France, they have heard that such things happen. There is no direct witness. Actually, one such action, there is limited evidence that it is applied. This situation, the card has also come to the fore in the trial about the place. Accusations of Republican marriages, removed from the indictment for lack of concrete evidence. But other charges during the period of terror. Card place and some accomplices, caused to be executed. Republican marriage. Criticizing the concept of worthy marriage, or it has one meaning that makes fun of, in some sources of the period, instead of traditional church marriage. Referring to couples who prefer worthy one wedding. Addressing the parents' reaction. There are records of stories of this period, sociopolitical, reflecting its structure and relations with the church. Interesting one detail. The iron chair. The iron chair, one of the historical methods of torture, and this explanation is correct one way, depicts this terrible device. The iron chair, from the Middle Ages, used as a means of torture and execution. One of the most frightening features of the chair, a large number of sharp thorns or knives on it. Victims caused by these thorns, before being exposed to intense pain and bleeding, can be held in this chair for hours. Iron chair in many countries. Torture tools were used. Europe in the Middle Ages and Renaissance. Iron chair usually adultery, witchcraft, perversion, or crimes against the state, applied to people thought to have committed. Italy, Spain. In countries like Germany and France, there are different versions of this terrible device. The iron chair is not just in Europe. Used in different parts of the world in China. Working on a similar principle, one other type of torture chair is known to be used. Using the iron chair today. Contrary to international law, this kind of torture works with the most basic principles of human rights. But unfortunately, in some regimes, this kind of torture is used. There are reports. Means of torture often create fear in the eyes of the public. Punishing criminals, or used to obtain information or confessions from people. Historically, tools such as iron chairs to accomplish this purpose. Seen as an effective way. But these methods, humanly and ethically unacceptable, and should not find a place in modern society. St. Catherine Wheel. St. Catherine Wheel, historically used for torture. 1. Is a tool and identified with the legend of St. Catherine. Catherine is known under Emperor Maximus. He was sentenced to death for his Christian faith. According to told, when they tried to tie him to this wheel for torture, one miracle happened and the wheel broke. As a result, St. Catherine was beheaded. In the history and art of Christianity, frequently described and described, Michelangelo and other artists. Catherine's portraits, usually broken, depicted with torture tools such as wheels and swords. Stories about the abuse of the Catherine wheel. Beyond historical narratives, it is also mentioned in popular culture, as well as the rap group of the same name. This wheel and the stories associated with it are in books, in songs and movies, and has been used repeatedly in other media forms. For example, in gymnastics, Catherine's wheel haraketi, named in reference to this wheel. The name of this movement has often been changed due to its use as a torture instrument. Catherine's wheel throughout history, as well as being constantly mentioned in popular culture. Crests bearing his name, logos and other symbols are also frequently seen. This shows its importance and continuity in history. Chest predator. Tool you mentioned, also known as the iron spider or Spanish spider, used in medieval Europe. One of the torture tools. Iron spider usually has 4 or more claws. Metal used to immerse claws in the human body. 1. Tool, The main purpose of this tool is to compress the meat on the woman's chest, to grasp and pluck. Sometimes these claws were used to tease. Thus, the victim was both burned and the meat was plucked. Use of this tool: adultery, especially for women; incest, resentment; accusations such as murder or against women accused of witchcraft. Order spider not only causes temporary pain in the body of the victim, leaving permanent marks and deformations, would create one stamp in society. This is the victim's social. Could cause exclusion. Middle Ages, human rights violations and torture throughout history. 1. Devices like iron spiders. How society reacts to accusations and rumors. It was brutal. 1 indicator. Such tools may have declined towards the end of the Middle Ages. But these dark periods of history are why modern societies should avoid such practices. Helps them understand the history of such torture devices, how far we have come in human history, and remind us how much longer we have to go. Foot tying. Foot tying practice. In China at certain periods of history, aesthetics one seen as ideal, serious physical. And it was one terrible tradition that caused psychological harm. This app is for girls. He started with an effort to keep his feet extremely small. This process prevents the natural growth of the feet. Fingers, grasping from the bottom and bending the base extremely inward. Feet L. One series of painful. Consisted of bandaging and crushing. The beginning of the tradition of tying feet for aesthetic reasons. Reflect the social norms and values of that period. This application is for young girls and women. It is undeniable that it brings serious physical pain and disability. Women with tied feet often have difficulty walking with painful steps. Sometimes they could not walk without support for the rest of their lives. The social pressures and expectations behind this event, generally based on broader social dynamics. For example, small foot. With feet 1, the woman may have done less physical work, and therefore higher than 1, thought to belong to the social class. Also tied feet 1 symbolize the woman's dependence and loyalty to her husband. Because these women usually have difficulty walking, they had to stay home. Reformers and educators, calling this tradition barbaric and reactionary, they opposed him. 1910 with the establishment of the Republic of China. The new government has banned this practice. Enforcement of this prohibition, especially in rural areas. In history books and museums 1. Remained as a souvenir. But the old woman who is a reminder of this dark period, people all. This application is physical, and live with psychological effects. Their stories. History, one reminder not to forget this cruel tradition. Coup de chair. Coup de chair, also known as the cradle of Judah. Italy used as a tool of torture in the Middle Ages. One torture tool developed by humans. This vehicle is usually in pyramid form, spiked one wood, or mounted on metal hilly. Consists of platform located at one height. Victim during torture to this pointed tip. Legs are positioned in one with two sides open. Weight of the device, or extra weights. Pressure on the victim's body. This is deep, causes pain and damage to internal organs. Sweater sitting. Torture of sitting in a sweater. Historically practiced in many cultures and periods. One extremely painful method of punishment. The body of the victim, starting from the top of the mouth or neck, until the sacrifice is usually sharp and deep with one large stake. The pile moves slowly due to the weight of the victim. This process can take hours or even days. This method of torture, especially 15 Wallachia, also known as the piled Vlad in the 19th century, often used by Prince Vlad III. Vlad's method, believed to be used as an intimidation tool. According to some sources, Vlad's management 10,000 people during, punished in this way. Cross. Corsets historically for aesthetic reasons. Slimming waist and female form. Used to put into certain one shape. In this time, the body shape and increased pressure on beauty standards. Historical use of corsets. Understanding of beauty. for shaping women's bodies. One example of how far you can go. Use of tight corsets. Difficulty breathing, digestive problems, rib and lumbar deformities. Caused health problems such as corset today, and similar products are not only fashionable, but also supporting the body's posture, lumbar support and surgery. After transactions, it is also used for reasons such as accelerating healing. But modern corsets usually made of breathable fabrics. Different patterns for each body. And often rather than harming women's bodies. It is important to note that they are designed to support. But just like foot tying and other similar applications, historically social, subject to gender norms and pressures. Women how much can be interfered with their bodies. One example showing the history of such applications tells us how to accept our bodies. And health and beauty with comfort. The balance between ideals, how we should find, offers important lessons. Perception of beauty even today, made for women because they are uniform, women to each other. And what he did to them, unfortunately, psychological violence. It can be counted among these tortures. About this topic, don't forget to share your ideas with us. See you in the next video. Please like, share, subscribe to Respect Labor.